Hello, Facebook, and welcome to Put What, Where, Why, and How. I am Mike Race, your creative organizing consultant of Western New York, and today's topic is about the life-changing magic of tidying up by Marie Kondo. And I have the book here. I wanted to say that when I did a little more research on this today, because I was actually just trying to reskim through the table of contents and looking up on Amazon and such, and Marie Kondo has come up with a few iterations of the same philosophies. This is the original book, 206 pages. And there is another book that is the summary of this book, which is less than 80 pages, I believe. And then she also has a more illustrated version, which from what I've read in the reviews is a more practical approach to organizing, whereas these guys are more about the philosophies of organizing and tidying and decluttering. And then the fourth item that is on my products page from Marie Kondo is a journal, which journaling has proven to be very helpful in a lot of journeys, and this is no exception. So journaling your journey through tidying using her journal, which has inspirational quotes and probably some prompts to help you through that journey. So for the rest of the video, I wanted to talk about her philosophies. I may interject with a couple of personal applications that I've had or things that I've seen with my clients, but the philosophies in this book is going to be the focus of this video. I'm going to go through kind of the table of contents just to do a summary of the book, which I think will be really helpful for people that watch my videos, specifically because they don't like reading things. Different media for different folks. So yeah, let's dive into the life-changing magic of tidying up. The Japanese Art of Decluttering and Organizing by Marie Kondo. This whole thing is all about making the decision to reset your life by going through all of your stuff in one go. Now, one go doesn't mean one sitting, but you have a starting point, you do everything that you own, and you get to a point where you go, I have everything I need and nothing more. And the journey is so much of a healing process, which is really why I've gotten into the business that I've gotten into, because I get to teach creativity and it saves lives in a metaphorical sense. And it's just really is magical. So chapter 1 is, why can't I keep my house in order? So she goes through all of these subcategories. You can't tidy if you've never learned how, which is so true. I think that we grow up being told to clean our room, but we don't necessarily get told how to go about cleaning our room. So we're not given any kind of structure. We just kind of like shuffle things around and whatever. So not knowing how to tidy up is one good reason why your house isn't in order, because there is a process and there are guidelines that help you. A tidying marathon doesn't cause rebound. And I think this is, again, talking about going through the whole process, and then when you get to the end, you don't have to continue to tidy, because now you're just maintaining the environment that you've created. You don't just constantly have to be tidying. Tidy a little day and you'll be tidying forever. So she kind of discounts the attitude of, well, I'll just do a little bit every day, like I'll throw out one item per day. But she talks about how that philosophy doesn't really ever get you to the point of being content with the stuff that you have. Why you should aim for perfection. Perfection is a very interesting category, especially when it comes to clutter. I find that a lot of people always have like elements of perfection, and because something can't be perfect, they don't bother with it at all, which is why things get so disastrous. So she talks about aiming for perfection, which having that ideal space in mind, I think, is important. The moment you start to reset your life, she talks about going into it. Storage experts are hoarders. She kind of discounts the thought of like always thinking about how you're going to go about storing things. She kind of brings it to the front end of like, well, no, don't try to store everything you have. Try to figure out what you have and utilize it and put it where it belongs. First problem comes to mind when you think of tidying. For many, the answer is storage. A booby trap lies within the term storage. Features on how to organize and store your belongings in convenient storage products are always accompanied by stock phrases that make it sound simple. She kind of discounts all of the storage hoopla and talks about what real functionality looks like. Sort by category, not by location. And the reason that's important is because you may not have all of your clothing in one place, which ultimately that's what you'd want it to be, so that it's easier for you to see all of your clothes and make a decision about what you're going to wear, and et cetera, and it's easy to put them away and whatnot. But if you sort like your room, and then you go to sort the living room, which also happens to have clothes in it, then you're not truly seeing the mass amount of shirts that you might have or what have you. So picking a category to go through, all of the photos, all of the things, and we're going to get back to that in a second. Don't change the method to suit your personality. So she tells you to watch out for, oh, but I like doing it this way. Make tidying a special event, not a daily chore. Again, doing it in one kind of swoop and then whatnots. Finish discarding first. This is chapter 2. So now she talks about the purging process. She encourages people to get rid of things first, decide and see what's left, and then decide where they go. So start by discarding all at once, intensely and completely. And she goes into what that means. But it really is intense, and it is to go in with the intention of completing the task is a lot to commit to, but it is what needs to happen for a real change. Before you start, visualize your destination. This is true in all circumstances for creativity or change. When you're trying to get to a more ideal space, whether that's metaphorical or literal in this sense, you want to visualize what your end goal is going to be. What does it look like to be successful in whatever it is that you're trying to achieve? So visualizing your destination is super important. And she goes into like actual sit down, close your eyes, visualize your space, where are things, what do you have in the room, that kind of stuff. And visualizations have proven to be very, very helpful. Marie Kondo does this with all of her clients, I believe, where they actually make them sit down and think about it, what their ideal space looks like. I will ask questions about what your goals are, but I'm not necessarily going to make you meditate around it, but that's, personal style. Select criterion. Does it spark joy? So this is kind of what you hear when you think about this book. If you've ever heard it in any of your circles, it's the book about sparking joy. And it's really kind of a cool way of looking at things. Her whole philosophy is you hold an object in your hand and you intuitively feel what that object gives you in terms of a feeling. And does it bring you grief? Does it bring you guilt? Does it bring you whatever? But this focuses on you hold the object and does it spark joy? Does it make you happy to be holding it? You get the tingling feeling, you smile. Does it do those things when you hold it in your hand? If yes, then that would be a keeper. And then anything that doesn't really fall in that category, consider purging. Actually, she would tell you to get rid of it. And I've definitely had to do that with some clients where they pick up an object. This makes me laugh so much. They pick up an object and they go, ugh. And then they put it with the rest of whatever it is. And I stop what I'm doing. I'm like, are you gonna address that? And they're like, what? I was like, well, you just picked up that object and you clearly had a very exasperated negative feeling about that object, but then you put it away in your space. So you were like, this negative thing, I'm gonna keep it. And then often they're like, oh yeah, and then they get rid of it. But it's just funny. Literally, if you pick up an object and go, ugh, then you probably shouldn't hang on to it. That's a red flag. One category at a time. So she'll encourage you to sort by category and then choose what to get rid of and what are your favorites out of that particular category. Clothing, and then those break down. And again, she talks about what the order of things to go through in a second, so I'll get to that. But categorical thinking, I preach that all the time. Very, very helpful. Starting with mementos spells certain failure. So when you're starting the decluttering journey, it is a better idea to start with stuff that's not as emotionally charged. So again, she's going to go through this, but starting with something like the memories box is not a good place to start because it's not going to be as easy to go through those things. But if you start with the things that are less emotionally attached to, then you're more likely to build confidence around the process by the time you get to the mementos and you go, okay, now I'm more confident in what brings me joy, what I should be keeping around, and what I should be getting rid of. And then you can make a more clearer judgment about the things that are harder to think about and make decisions. Okay, this part. Don't let your family see. If you're mad at your family, your room may be the cause. What you don't need, your family doesn't either. So she starts to bring in her family, and she talks about her like upbringing and how she's impacted her family with this process. But she talks about if you are like, oh, well, I don't need this shirt, this pile of shirts, she encourages you not to show your family. She'll encourage you to be like, if you don't need this shirt, then they don't need it either. It's most likely, unless they were like, oh, if you ever get rid of that shirt, you know, you tell me, because I want that shirt. Okay. I don't know that she addresses that, but that's something I'm saying. But she will say, if you don't need it, your family doesn't need it, so get rid of it. You're really just taking your clutter that you've decided doesn't belong in your circle, and you're passing off this thing that no longer serves purpose to somebody else that you love, when it's more likely to have a second life if you give it to a wider audience, thrift stores, etc. But it is a thing when you go through all your stuff and you're like, oh, but I know somebody, they might want this. She kind of wards you against that. Tidying is a dialogue with oneself, and what to do when you can't throw something away. And that speaks to how personal of a process it can be to declutter. It's, like I always say this, that often the internal and external environments reflect each other. So when you're going through things, and I see this with a lot of clients, they carry a lot of guilt for like having so much clutter. It might stir up old relationships, all sorts of stuff. So the tidying process is quite an internal dialogue, and it's one conversation that life is waiting to have with you. And then what to do when you can't throw something away. She addresses this often throughout the whole book. This whole book gives you frames of judgment on how to think about your stuff. Tidying by category works like magic. The tidying order. So she suggests that you tidy in a specific order. So you start with clothing, and then she even breaks down clothing. If you have a very large clothing repertoire, then she suggests starting with tops, shirts, sweaters, etc., bottoms, pants and skirts, etc., clothing that should be hung, jacket, coats, suits, etc., then socks, then underwear, then bags, accessories, clothing for specific events like swimsuits, uniforms, etc., then shoes. So that's just breaking down the clothing category. So she kind of breaks down each category. But clothing is the first one that she recommends. Oh, and then she teaches you how to fold. I worked at a clothing store, Eddie Bauer, for like 2 months, and I learned how to fold stuff. It changed my life. So learn how to fold to expand your wardrobe. Start with clothes, then move on to books, then papers, then komono, which represents miscellaneous in Japanese, I suppose. And finally, things with sentimental value. That is the order that she recommends. And like I mentioned, the sentimental value stuff, leaving it for last is really a good idea, because by the time you get there, you would have already practiced the process with things that are less emotionally driven. Learn how to fold. She talks about that. Storing your socks, seasonal clothes. She recommends eliminating seasonal clothes storage and just simply having a closet that has access to all of your clothing all of the time. But again, this is her philosophy. Not that it works for everybody, but I think it is a really great philosophy to bounce off of. Storing books. So people that have a lot of books, she recommends literally taking all of the books off the shelf onto the floor and then seeing them all. By doing this, it forces you to hold each book. You can make a decision from there. If you're looking at the books on a bookshelf and you try to make a decision when they're already sorted, or maybe they're not sorted, but they're already put on a shelf, it makes it easier for you to pass by those books and not truly consider them. So forcing the client to hold each book, does it spark joy? She also warns against like reading it, because then you're switching into rational thinking, which, not that she discounts rational thinking, because obviously that's helpful, but when it comes to hanging on to things, she encourages you to use your intuition and truly know if you want this thing. So you feel it in your soul whether or not you want to keep this item. If you start to think about it rationally, you start to hear those things like, oh, I might use it someday. Oh, I might need to whatever. Like, it comes up with reasons to keep it when you're using your rational mind. So using your intuition will help you more along this journey. Okay, she goes deeper into how to organize your books. I know a lot of people struggle with the books organization and what to keep. That can be very helpful in terms of framing how you judge what books to keep. Then she talks about sorting through your papers, and her recommendation is to get rid of everything. Nothing annoys Marie Kondo more than paperwork, and that's just so much to do. So she's just like, get rid of it unless it's something you need to attend to or it's something that you need to keep forever, like birth certificates and social security cards and stuff like that. They do recommend you keep your taxes for 7 years, but after that, get rid of it. Da-da-da-da. Then she goes through the kimono, which is the miscellaneous items, and she really talks about keeping the things you truly love. Just the things you love. Not just because this is the thing. When you have an item that's like, oh, I keep it just because, when I find people going through these things and they pick them up, the only reason they're picking them up is to decide whether or not to keep them. So you don't actually hang on to it for whatever purpose you might think that it has, but you pick it every time you interact with this object. You're like, oh, I've had this for so long, it's kind of a trinket, and should I keep it? Like every time. And they're like, yeah, I'm gonna hang on to it. And the next time they go, oh yeah, this object I forgot about, should I keep it? Yeah. Like literally the only purpose it serves is to make you ask the question whether or not you're gonna keep it, so you should probably let it go. Common types of kimono. Disposables, she goes into great detail. I'm gonna skip that. Small change. Make into my wallet your motto. I wanted to talk about this because it definitely doesn't work for me, but she encourages you to always put your coins into your wallet immediately whenever you get coins, and then spend the coins when you need to spend the coins, I suppose. She encourages you to put it right into your wallet immediately when you come across it. However, I've minimized so much that I don't have a wallet anymore. I only have my phone, which carries like 2 cards. So I don't have anywhere to put my coins except for my pocket. And I thought it was kind of funny because in here she says, frankly, no one I've met who saves pennies without a clear purpose has ever actually used them. If you are saving coins with the vague idea that it would be nice to see how many you can accumulate, now is the time to take them to the bank. The longer you wait, the heavier your cash will be, and the more bother to take it to the bank. So, I mean, maybe I don't have a clear purpose for collecting all of my pennies, but I do have a jar that I throw all of my coins, and when the coins fill up, I take it to Coinstar, and I dump them, and I count them, and then I get an iTunes gift card that costs me 0 fees, because I'm constantly spending money on the iTunes store. So that's how I deal with coins. I just go meh, 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 and then they add up to like $40 when I go change them in. So I personally don't work in this into my wallet motto. It's more into the coin cup for me. But to each their own. Then they go into sentimental items. Your parents' home is not a haven for mementos. She talks about, and I'm sure a lot of you can feel this, is your kids' stuff and or your stuff just simply end up in a space in your parents' house. And this addresses that. Photos, she says, cherish who you are now. Astounding stockpiles I have seen. She goes into like just quantity of certain items that she's seen. I believe she uses toothbrushes as an example. Somebody had like 80 toothbrushes at once. And then she talked about how that's too many for the time being. Reduce until you reach the point where something clicks. And this is that moment I mentioned earlier in the video where you start the journey and then the finishing point is when it clicks, when you feel like I have everything I need and I need nothing more. It's a moment to have, and it's a moment to look up forward to. But she talks about that moment, and that's the moment that I hope everyone gets to, where they feel, I'm set. I can function now. Follow your intuition and all will be well. Again, following your intuition. And it's a really interesting process to truly listen to your body and your mind, and not the words in your mind, but you just listen to the feeling that you get when you hold an object. It might feel weird for some people, but she lives and dies by it. I encourage you to try it, because it is a pretty cool experience to be like, oh, there is intuition that I can tap into, and it tells me, do I like this or do I not like this? And then you keep repeating it for everything that you own, and then eventually you build confidence because you suddenly can decide what you like and what you don't like. Chapter 4, storing your things to make your life shine. Designate a place for each thing. Everything has a home, then it can go back to that home. Discard first, store later. Deciding what to keep before you decide to put things away where they live. Because you don't want to put things away you don't need, you know? Storage, pursue ultimate simplicity. This is an interesting chapter, and I'd like to bring the imposter syndrome into the conversation. So when it comes to professional organizing, we, as professionals, tend to get the imposter syndrome where we feel like people are going to find us out, that we're somehow a scam or whatnot. And part of the reason for that is because organizing is easy to us. And it feels like we're selling you something that feels very simple. This chapter talks about how, as a professional organizer, people might expect us to pull some like super magic storage solution, whatever, out of our pockets. But in reality, the simplest, most obvious solutions are often the best solutions. Pursuing ultimate simplicity is not to have super complex storage solutions. Like, make it simple. You put them on the shelf, you put them in a drawer, you get all these fancy storage thingamajigs, and it actually just becomes too much and sometimes becomes dysfunctional. And she uses a really good example about how she tried to use a lazy Susan to organize salad dressings, but ultimately they all looked good when they were set, but it didn't function because when it was spun, the bottles would fall over and it just didn't work. So they had to simplify and find a solution that really wasn't quite as fancy. Don't scatter storage spaces. This talks about making sure that all of the same stuff go in the same place. You don't store your toilet paper in 3 different areas of the house, for example. Forgetting about flow planning and frequency of use. Flow planning is talking about like how and where people function throughout the house. And she uses the example of having like books next to the toilet to read and stuff like that. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about this exactly, but she just really encourages you to have, for instance, all of the books in one place, rather than, the immediate space that you might be using it, because it only takes 10 seconds to walk from one side to the other, is the example that she uses. This is a time to take an aside that, again, philosophies are one thing, and it's a really beautiful philosophy, and I think it's something to consider, but it also may not work for everybody because of everyone's circumstances is so unique, which is why you hire a professional organizer so that they can help you achieve your goals that align to your needs, which may be very different than what this book has to offer. Never pile things. Vertical storage is key. This is one of my favorite parts of the book. Never pile things. Vertical storage is key. If you think about a bookshelf and piling the books on top of each other, she talks about how the bottom items, or in this case, my example, the bottom book, carries all of the weight of all of the items on top of it. And it can, depending on what the items are, is going to diminish the quality or the condition of the stuff on the bottom because it is holding all of those things. But more obvious, it's much harder to grab the items that are on the bottom because you have to lift or move the stuff that's sitting on top of it. You just take that stack of books and rotate it so that the books are lined up vertically, as the book says. Then you can still see all of your options, but now you just pull out the book you need and put it back nice and easily, and they are only carrying their own weight. They're not sitting on top of each other and removing the good condition that they're in. So yes, vertical storage es muy bueno. No need for commercial storage items. She talks about not buying all the plastic bins, all the cool storage options that you can find in the stores and whatnot, and she says just use shoe boxes and iPhone cases and stuff like that, which I do encourage people to do, like reuse items in your house that makes storage more easily. There are probably a lot of solutions that come to you through your house that you can use to help create storage without needing to spend a lot of money on plastic containers and whatnot. Particularly the ones with the lids can be dangerous because if you put something on a lid, then things end up piling on top of the lid, and then it becomes, again, hard to get the things that are underneath, which kind of goes against that vertical storage that we just talked about. The best way to store bags is in another bag. I have a bag of bags. Bag of bags. I love the bag of bags. Empty your bag every day. She encourages you to take your backpack or your purse or your messenger bag or whatever it is that you have and actually take everything out of it and put them in their respective homes. And then when you go to leave, you put the things you need for the day back into your bag. This also does not work for me. But I understand why she says it. And it can be very, very helpful. And if you are one of those people that end up having like makeup or what have you get lost in the bottom of a bag, I would maybe at least increase the frequency of which you remove the stuff out of a bag to put them away. Items that usurp floor space belong in the closet. So yeah, things that are on the floor, big electronics and whatnot, she encourages you to put them in the closet. Keep things out of the bath and the kitchen sink. That chapter, I actually really love this. It just talks about how it's much easier to clean your sink or your bathtub and whatnot if you don't have the items resting on it. And I also just really love having a clean counter space so that when I am doing my brushing my teeth or washing my face or what have you, I just have the items on the counter that I need and I can put them away versus having everything out. Then it's cluttered and it's hard to get the things you need, and maybe if you need more space to do a thing, there's not space for it because there's just stuff taking up that counter space. So keeping the things off the bath and kitchen sink is muy bueno. She also tries to encourage you away from the wire baskets and stuff that they keep shampoo in and whatnot. But and the reason she says that is because they can get gummy and whatnot, and they're hard to clean. I use one. I haven't really found an issue with the cleaning because they don't really get very dirty, which, I don't know, maybe I'm just not soaping it up, but it's fine. You do you, boo-boo. Make the top shelf of your bookcase your personal shrine. I have taken this into account. I've got actually 2 shelves on my bookcase that are shrine-like. I got some crystals and tarot cards and dragons and some cool stones and whatever. Which, sorry if you're offended by that, but I like New Age stuff, and that is my shrine. It's wonderful. Gives you a place to keep some of your prized knickknacks. Decorate your closet with your secret delights. Skip. Unpack and detag new clothes immediately. She suggests, and she tells you why. Don't underestimate the noise of written information. That one really bugs the heck out of me. I see it often when there's too many labels or words that actually like ignites a part of the brain that wants to read things, and that can be distracting from going in and making a decision or what have you. So if you're opening up a space that feels organized but you're not quite sure why it's unsettling, look to see if there's a lot of words in the visual space, because you might be, boo, it's like it looks good, it looks straight, but at the same time there's so many words that it's distracting, and it's very powerful, so consider that. Appreciate your possessions and gain strong allies. This was a cool part of the book for me. This talks about gratitude and sending your items off in a different way than people might do naturally. So a lot of people will let go of something and be like, oh, I'm sorry that I never really got to use you, or I feel bad that I'm throwing this away because I'm wasting it. She asks you to shift your perspective so that you're saying, oh, thank you for serving your purpose, thank you for sparking joy, thank you, and go have your second life and whatnot. So she talks about, instead of being sorry and feeling wasteful, but to switch your perspective to, I'm giving this item a chance at a second life by donating it, and being grateful that it was in your life and it served a purpose at one time. And then it also talks about not necessarily letting things go, but appreciating the stuff that you do have. So when you hang up your coat, thanking it for keeping you warm, things of that sort. And it might seem, again, weird, because we're talking about that weird realm of things, but it might seem weird to thank physical objects that aren't human and they may not respond or whatever, but there is this weird response that you get from your items. First of all, you're creating a different relationship and you're showing that item respect, and it's kind of magical how the item shows respect back to you and serves you more and better, and it actually lasts longer if you do these things. And then you're also kind of like hanging them up properly, and you're putting them away in a respectful way so that they're not being diminished in quality, etc., etc. So it's interesting to really respect the items that you have versus wanting to just simply hang on to items and make them yours, but you're actually giving them a personality by thanking them for being around and serving their purpose. It's a very interesting dynamic and relationship that can build. The magic of tidying dramatically transforms your life. Chapter 5. This is the reason behind doing what we do, and it's, again, the word magic is kind of an appropriate word to use. So this says, put your house in order and discover what you really want to do. So by going through all your stuff, deciding what's good, what's not good, you learn what brings you joy, and then you clear the way of all the things that don't. And by clearing the way, you actually open the door to discovering what you truly want to do with your life journey. It creates a flow, as we call it in creativity, and it just points you in the right direction because all of the stuff that's been standing in your way has now been removed. And it's much clearer what direction your life might take. The magic effect of tidying, gaining confidence in life through the magic of tidying. Again, I spoke to the confidence because if you keep practicing with each item, what brings you joy, what doesn't bring you joy, and practicing how you make those judgments and being honest with yourself and truly bringing it down to what you need, you start to really gain confidence in who you are and what you want and how to get it. It's kind of an inexplicable, but this change really does happen in people. An attachment to the past or anxiety about the future. She talks about how we think about our stuff is often how we think about life. So if you're hanging on to a lot of stuff that doesn't serve purpose, then you probably have a lot of anxiety over the past that you haven't let go of. And if you're worried about the future, aka, oh, I need to hang on to this because I might need it someday, then you also have anxiety for the future in a general sense. So the way that you hang on to and attach to your stuff, whether that's worrying about the past or the future, that manifests itself in all of the other areas of your life. And she gives some really good examples in here about that. Learning what you can do without. That's a beautiful thing. If you've figured out a way to live with less, then you just simply need less. And it's a lot more relaxing to not need so much stuff. Do you greet your house? So back to kind of like the being grateful. She talks about walking into your house, thanking the house for being a shelter to you and welcoming and all the things. So creating an appreciation and a respect for the house itself. Your possessions want to help you. This chapter reminded me of Toy Story a little bit, but she talks about how items really want to help you, and when they get rejected, they like get sad and pushed in the corner and stuff. And it's an interesting chapter. It's interesting to think about the items themselves wanting to serve you, and then framing it so that if they don't serve you, that you kind of let them go in a like leaving the nest kind of situation. So you like let them be free and serve their next life, and it actually revitalizes them as an item, etc., etc. So very interesting chapter. Is it true that tidying increases good fortune? She talks about feng shui a little bit in this chapter. It's an interesting chapter to think about. Simply just getting organized and tidied would bring good fortune. And I think that, and she points out that it's true in that when you are surrounded by things that you love and things are functioning properly and whatnot, they do bring about good fortune because of the fortune is not necessarily wealth. Fortune can be in mood or in the spiritual experience or what have you. How to identify what is truly precious. She talks about judgment once again and how to make that choice. Being surrounded by things that spark joy makes you happy. And that is so true. If you literally remove all of the things that have any kind of negative or even neutral energy to them, and you just have the stuff that spark joy, then everything that's around you is giving you energy, which is a really cool lifestyle, because it's we all need a little more joy and happiness. Your real life begins after putting your house in order. And that is also so very true. And I think that's just, again, clearing the way to the true, authentic you by removing the stuff that's holding you back, holding you down, and giving you negative energy and what have you. So that was the table of contents and some bantering around it of the life-changing magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. Pick up your copy. It's only $10 for the book itself. I think the Kindle version is even cheaper. And you can find all of those links on my products page, which should be in the description of this live video, depending on if you're Facebook or YouTube. It's somewhere. So yeah, definitely check out the book, and I'm curious about the skepticism too. So like if the philosophies work for you, or if they work for you to a certain extent, or what have you. Like, I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about the book. But I definitely recommend it, and I've recommended it to a number of people. This is actually my friend Caitlin's book. 4 people have read this exact book and committed to living a more organized, tidy life. Hopefully we're going to continue passing this book around our circle and having people sign committing to that lifestyle, because it really is liberating, and that's why I'm so grateful to be in the business of helping to liberate others from their clutter.